Okay, so today we're going to be talking about 10-2 quadratic functions. We're going to be doing more graphing. We're going to be talking about the graph of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, as long as a does not equal 0, which would actually make it linear because this whole part of it would be gone. So we're going to be looking at negative b over 2a. So the line x equals negative b over 2a is going to be our axis of symmetry for our parabola. And specifically, the x-coordinate of the vertex is negative b over 2a. So what will happen is we'll draw that line of the axis of symmetry so that we can see the line that our parabola will be sitting on. So here we have a problem that I have worked out. F of x, of course, we understand that that is the same as y. The function of x is equal to x squared minus 6x plus 9. So using our negative b over 2a, we have negative 6 over 2 times 1, because we have a 1 there for x squared. This becomes a positive 6 over 2, which is equal to 3. So now I have come over here to x equals 3, and I've put my axis of symmetry line, just a very light line there. Now I make my chart just like we did in the last section. I make my chart, I come up with my y, and remember, I've got it as y, they have it as f of x. It is the same thing, okay? And I have graphed these points for my parabola, and then I have looked at the fact that it is symmetrical, so I have gotten my symmetrical points, and then I have created my parabola. So hopefully you can see how that all works, and we can see, how this is all working in here with our equation. So I'm just kind of pausing to let you actually copy that. Now, working on another problem, okay, we have another problem here, and this is y equals negative x squared plus 8x minus 5. We're going to do the same thing. Negative b over 2a. Negative b is negative 8 over 2 times negative 1. Gives us a negative 8 over a negative 2, which is a positive 4. I come over to my graph, and I build my axis of symmetry just lightly, knowing that this is my axis of symmetry and understanding that my quadratic is negative for my a. That means that I'm going to have a maximum for my vertex rather than a minimum, and I will open down. And then, just as I have done before, based on my axis of symmetry, I'm actually going to use the points. So using that 4 as x, I got my vertex y point as 11 up here. And then I did 2 and 7 and 0, excuse me. And then I was able to find these symmetrical points for that graph. Okay, so pausing just a little bit so that you can see the math that was done here. Okay, so really that's all we are looking at. Today we are focused on this negative b over 2a. We're getting that axis of symmetry. This is at this point here is that x equals 4. That's my axis of symmetry. And then I put the 4 in to my equation, and I get my y, which tells me that my vertex point, my vertex, is at 411. Okay? Now we're going to kind of expand this idea just a little bit, and we are going to look at inequalities. Now, inequalities are going to be done exactly the same way as the equality, but we're going to use the information from our inequalities that we did with our linear functions. So here we have a less than or equal to equation. This means that our parabola will have a solid line. We're going to come down here. We're going to do the same thing as we've been doing. Negative b over 2a. Negative b is negative 2 over 2 times 1 gives me a negative 1. So x is equal to negative 1. I have come over to my graph to negative 1. I have done my dotted line or my dashed line. Put my points in, okay? And now you can see I have my first set of points, my negative 1, negative 6, my 0, negative 5, and my 1, negative 2. Now I'm going to put the points up here that are symmetrical. And remember, this is going to be a solid line, so I can bring my parabola up and around, making sure that I curve just that little bit. Now, I have to determine whether I am going to shade inside or if I'm going to shade outside of my parabola. So once again, I'm going to look at where an easy point is. Now, origin 0, 0 is going to be inside my parabola. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 5, okay, and that's 0 because remember I'm using 0, 0. So 0 squared, 0, 0. So 0, is that less than or equal to negative 5? No, it is not. It is actually greater than negative 5. Can you see that out there? So that means I'm not shading inside, I am shading outside of this parabola. And that is how we are going to work with our inequalities. I can do one more problem for you with the inequalities if I just gradually get my paper. Actually, I thought I had one started, but I did not. So we'll just easily shift this so that we don't cause it to stop. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead, and this time I've got y, and I will make sure you can see that. Y is greater than x squared plus x plus 1. Okay, I'm going to start again with negative b over 2a, which is negative b is negative 1 over 2 times 1 equals negative 1 over 2. So that equals my x. Okay, so I'm at a negative 1/2 here, so I need to be aware of that. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to build my coordinate plane. I am going to go to my negative 1/2. I'm going to put a little line down there. Okay, and now my chart. And I'm going to use 0, I'm going to use the 1/2, and I'm going to go ahead and use 1. 0, this is negative 1/2 here, because I need to use that, and I'm not going to use a negative 1, I'm just going to use the 1. So 0 squared plus 0 plus 1, and my y is 1. Negative 1/2, so negative 1/2 squared is 1/4 plus negative 1/2 plus 1 So 1/4 minus 1/2 is going to be negative 1/4. Is there 1/4? Negative 1/4 plus 1. So this is going to be 3/4. And then 1 is going to be 1 squared plus 1 is 3. Okay, so let's see if this actually works for me. Negative 1/2. So 0, x, I'm at 1. So I would be here. Negative 1/2. I'm at 3/4. So I'm about here. And 1 and 3, 1, 2, 3, I'm here. Let me do this in my pink. Okay, I'll get my other points. Now I'm dealing with greater than. So I'm somehow going to try to dash that line. Okay, it's not real good. But I think that you can get the idea that it's not solid. Now, once again, I have to determine where I'm going to shade. Now, I can still use 0, 0, okay? So I'm going to look at this and say 0 squared plus 0 plus 1, and that's 0 is greater than. So this is then 0 is greater than 1, okay? No, it's not. So that means I can't shade out here. That means in this case, we're shading inside the parabola. So you're doing the same thing as you do for your equations, but with your inequalities, you have to remember the shading and whether or not it is a solid line or a dashed line. Okay, that's it, and good luck with this tomorrow, and we will talk about it more on Thursday if you have questions. Okay.